From the CPRE Knowledge Hub and cprehub.org, this is Research Minutes, a deep dive into new and important research in the realm of education. Today we look at absenteeism and how one of the oldest and most widely used interventions can actually have a negative impact on student attendance.
So to our surprise, it turns out that giving students an award for having perfect attendance in a prior month actually increased absences. Instead of motivating students to keep having excellent attendance, the awards were sending unintended signals that we didn't expect.
We welcome Harvard University's Carly Robinson, who recently led a study of more than 15,000 students to determine how school-sponsored attendance awards impacted absenteeism. She joined CPRE Hub Managing Editor Keith Heumiller to discuss her findings, their potential explanations, and some key takeaways for those hoping to curb absenteeism in their own schools.
I think this study serves as a cautionary tale for all of us, educators, policymakers, and researchers alike. There are a lot of educational practices out there that are accepted because they seem like common sense. But we found that this really ubiquitous practice that we all thought worked actually does not work.
That's right now on Research Minutes.
Hi, I'm Keith Heumiller, Managing Editor of the CPRE Knowledge Hub, and today I'm happy to be joined by Carly Robinson, a peer fellow with the Center for Education Policy Research at Harvard University and a doctoral student with the Harvard Graduate School of Education. It's a pleasure to have you, Carly.
Thanks, Keith. It's great to be speaking with you.
So today we're discussing what seems to be a perennial concern for teachers and school leaders, attendance. Many studies have found links between absenteeism, particularly chronic absenteeism, and a range of immediate and long-range negative student outcomes. And over the years, schools have used a variety of strategies, tools, and interventions to try and encourage students to, attend. So you and your team recently looked at one approach in particular, attendance certificates. So can you just give us some background on what those are and why you felt this was an important area of study?
Sure. So our overarching goal is to develop relatively low-cost, scalable interventions that reduce student absenteeism. As you mentioned, it's well known that the more days students are absent, the worse their outcomes are. So schools need interventions that can meaningfully reduce the number of school days students miss each year. And ideally, those interventions are not a major drain on school resources. So back in 2014, my collaborators and I became interested in studying the very common practice of giving students awards for having excellent attendance. We surveyed educators, and almost all of them report using awards to motivate student attendance in some way or another. But despite the prevalence of these attendance awards, there was not that much out there telling us how effective they are. So we wanted to test whether giving students awards for excellent attendance actually reduces absenteeism. Of course, there are many different types of awards. Most schools don't have a budget for rewarding students. So most often, students will receive symbolic awards like a certificate or a PENN that recognize excellent attendance but don't actually have any value. And the way in which students receive these awards can vary. In some cases, students are told they can earn an award for having excellent attendance going forward. We call this a prospective award, and it is a pre-announced award that you earn based on your future behavior. In other cases, students might receive an award at the end of a month or a semester for having had excellent attendance. This is called a retrospective award, and it is an award that you earn based on your past behavior. So we conducted an experiment to see what happens when you offer students symbolic awards for excellent attendance, and we varied the way students receive these awards. So we were able to learn whether attendance awards are more effective when they are announced and students have a goal to work for, or when they are given after the fact, indicating that students have been doing a good job and that they should keep it up.
So your new study, now published in Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, involved more than 15,000 students in grades 6 through 12 across 14 diverse school districts in California. And your team, including UCLA's Yana Gallus, Stanford's Monica G. Lee, and Harvard's Todd Rogers, you took a bit of a unique approach here, and you mailed out your own essentially unofficial attendance certificates to qualifying students. So can you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, so first, students in our sample all had a perfect month of attendance in the fall. So that means they had 0 absences in either September, October, or November. And the reason for this was so we could plausibly say, good job, you had an excellent month of attendance in the fall to all the students in our sample. At the end of January, we randomly assigned these students to one of three conditions, a control group or one of two award conditions. Students in the control group did not receive any communications from us, so they never knew about any attendance awards. Students assigned to the first award condition received a letter to their homes at the end of January telling them that they could earn an award if they had a perfect month of attendance in February. We called this the prospective award condition because it was an announced award that could be earned based on their future attendance. Students in the second award condition were also sent a letter home at the end of January, but this letter said, "Congratulations, you have earned an award for having had a perfect month of attendance in the fall." And in that mailing, they actually received a really nice certificate that looked important and had their name printed on it. And this was the retrospective award condition where students received an award for having excellent attendance in the past. So we sent those mailings to students' homes at the end of January, as I said. Then we looked at students' attendance in February the following month.
Gotcha. And did you have any expectations for how students might respond to receiving those awards?
Good question. Yes, we thought that both types of awards, the prospective award and the retrospective award, would result in students reducing the number of days they were absent in the following month compared to the control group. And we were so confident that we actually pre-registered our hypothesis publicly online before looking at the data.
So bouncing off of that, let's jump right into your results. I think you found that your hypothesis might have been a little premature.
Yes. So to our surprise, it turns out that giving students an award for having perfect attendance in a prior month actually increased absences. The students who received the retrospective award missed 8% more days of school in February than students in the control group who did not receive any award. We also found that having the opportunity to earn an award for having perfect attendance in February did not reduce the number of days students missed on average. But when we looked at these students' attendance in the month of March, when the opportunity to earn the award was removed, they also increased their absences relative to students in the control group. So it appears that after the award period is over, absences increase.
I expect those findings were at least a little surprising to your team, as they likely are to anyone who's listening to this or who reads your study. What could possibly explain that sort of inverse impact?
So we were pretty stumped when we saw these results. As I mentioned, we had predicted the opposite. And I'd like to say we definitely would not have implemented the intervention if we knew it was going to make kids go to school less. But we wanted to understand what was happening. So we conducted follow-up studies and found that these awards were telling kids, good job. But instead of motivating students to keep having excellent attendance, the awards were sending unintended signals that we didn't expect. So students who got the award thought that they were attending school more than their classmates and that they were attending school more than their school expected them to. And what's interesting is that we found that it was primarily the academically low-performing students who were most likely to increase their absences after getting an award. So when you give students an award for their attendance, especially students who might find school difficult and who may not particularly like going to school, at least it leaves them feeling licensed to miss a day of school going forward because they're thinking that this award means that they're already doing better than others and that they're overshooting what was expected of them when it comes to attendance. So what we think is happening is that these awards are sending a signal about what the social norm for attendance is and that you are actually doing better than the social norm for attendance. And so what we know about social norms is that we tend to conform our behavior to what the norm is. So if you think you're doing better, you think you're attending more school than your classmates, then you can conform your behavior to match what you think your classmates' behavior is, which is attending less school than you were before.
So what do you think are the implications here? Are there any takeaways that might be of use to school leaders, teachers, districts, or even policymakers who are working to try and curb absenteeism in their schools?
Yeah, there are a few takeaways from this study that I see. First, there are definitely still open questions about when awards do and do not motivate behavior. There seem to be contexts where they may be effective, but I do think there's something about school-based attendance awards that just doesn't work. So I hope this research can help really well-meaning educators to think more critically about some of the potential unintended consequences of introducing awards. Second, when it comes to reducing student absenteeism, I'm happy to report that not all of our interventions have backfired. Along with Todd Rogers and his lab, we now have conducted a couple of studies showing that sending parents personalized mailers about their child's attendance can reduce student absenteeism anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I would point districts and policymakers to interventions like this one that have proven to be effective. And finally, and along those lines, I think this study serves as a cautionary tale for all of us, educators, policymakers, and researchers alike. There are a lot of educational practices out there that are accepted because they seem like common sense. But we found that this really ubiquitous practice of giving awards that we all thought worked actually does not work. So it really highlights the need for practitioners and researchers to partner with one another to evaluate the effectiveness of even the most well-established practices.
Great. And are there any opportunities here for future research, either for your team or for other researchers who are looking into this topic of absenteeism?
We are exploring a couple other lines of research that could have implications for reducing absenteeism. First, we're currently in the preliminary stages of developing interventions that reduce teacher absenteeism. It turns out that teacher absences are a big problem for many districts, and you can imagine how teachers missing many days of school could negatively impact a lot of different things. So we're excited about the possibility of interventions that might get teachers to miss less school and how that might impact student outcomes, including their attendance. The second line of research I want to mention involves improving teacher-student relationships. Decades of research tells us that positive teacher-student relationships matter when it comes to student outcomes, including their performance, their motivation, and their attendance. But there aren't many research-based strategies for improving these classroom relationships. So I'm currently testing interventions that aim to improve teacher-student relationships, and then I'll be able to look at how those better relationships might impact student attendance down the line. So these are two pretty early-stage research projects that I'm excited about going forward.
That's fascinating, and I'm sure we'll all be waiting to see the results of that research. So, Carly, this is an incredibly eye-opening study, and we encourage our listeners to go read the full article, The Demotivating Effect and Unintended Message of Awards, in the journal Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes. Carly Robinson, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thanks for having me, Keith.
Thanks for listening to this week's Research Minutes, presented by the CPRE Knowledge Hub. For more episodes or to subscribe to this series, visit us at cprehub.org. That's cprehub.org. To share thoughts on today's episode or to suggest future topics, you can follow us on Twitter at CPREHub.